Welcome to the Real Estate Debate.
Oh, right, guy.
And today we're debating the hottest topics in real estate.
But I'm not going to stop yelling because then that'll mean I lost the fight.
And now, the host of the Real Estate Debate, Mr. Credit, on ESPN Radio, 1700.
Let the games begin. Hey-o.
All right, welcome. It is that time for the Real Estate Debate. Thank you for joining us. This is where we debate the hottest topics in San Diego real estate. Today we have a great crew in here. Let's start with Voltaire Leppi with Foster Hamilton in the South Bay and FreePropertyEvaluations.com. Voltaire's been on the show many times before, but this is your first real estate debate. Voltaire, welcome.
Thank you. Looking forward to this next hour. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, going to be a lot of fun. Full disclosure, Voltaire did buy me lunch this week, so everyone's got to just half step behind him from the very beginning. But I'll just go ahead and put that out there. Also, first-time guest on the Real Estate Debate and this show, but not the first time that we've shared a mic together. Michael Gaddis is here from the Michael Gaddis Realty Group and MichaelGaddis.com. Michael, welcome to the Real Estate Debate.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Very good to have you. Now, Michael is an attorney and a realtor. And yet, what's your saying again? You get more, but it doesn't cost you more. Something
That's
like
right. I give you more, but it doesn't cost you more.
There it is. So he has a very interesting perspective. I promise I won't utilize the fact that you're an attorney today. I won't ping you too many times for attorney advice, but that probably will happen at some point. We also have, rounding out our group today, Brad Brinkman in the studio from the Beach Cellar and BradBrinkman.com. Brad is a former champion of the Real Estate Debate, looking to become the first two-time champion of the Real Estate Debate. Brad, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek.
All right. Now, I do have to say, we are playing, the hardware is here. So it's got very real. If you're watching the live stream on MrCredit.tv, this is what the trophy looks like. I'm actually going to go ahead right now and hand this. This is from episode 2. This is Brad Brinkman's trophy right here from the first time he was on the Real Estate Debate. Pretty awesome, right, Brad?
I love it.
All right.
You.
You could leave today with 2 of those things.
Fantastic. That's awesome.
You're going to have to get a mantle or something. It's a legit trophy. It's about 2 feet tall, radio microphone on it, of course, going with the red, white, and blue theme. So that's what we'll be playing for today as well. All right. To start the Real Estate Debate, what we do is we take the temperature of the market. Now, typically we would say, hey, are we in a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a balanced market, and why? Today what I'd like to do is have you describe today's market using one word and then tell us why you chose that word. We're going to start from left to right. Voltaire, you're up first. Describe today's real estate market right now with one word and tell us why.
Opportunistic.
Really?
Yeah, so I think it's an opportunistic market for a couple of reasons. If you're a seller looking to sell, it's the perfect time because interest rates are low. You could have someone pay top dollar for the property. And you could get out in the summer. In the summertime, sell for top dollar. If you're a buyer, there's still opportunity because you get the best, rate before it goes up. One of the best rates in history, looking back the last 40 years. So there's a lot of opportunity whether you're a seller or a buyer. And if you're a buyer, you're buying in an appreciating market, which means you might have some appreciation, some equity in there for next year, the year after, compared to buying in a declining market, a buyer's market, where prices are just dropping.
So you might be kind of ahead of it versus being behind it, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Opportunistic. I like that. That's a big word.
It's long. I had to Google it.
How do you Google something you don't know how to spell? But Google knows,
yeah,
right?
Google
so you
knows.
Start typing it in, and Google figures it out. Brad Brinkman, tell us what is the current state of the real estate market in San Diego right now? One word, and then tell me why.
Gosh, so sometimes I say cautious, sometimes I say even, but today I'm just going to say, and that depends on the time frame and the year and conditions and all that. But my one word is fantastic, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in terms of sellers, sellers have been waiting for this day for quite some time, since about 2008, let's say. And buyers, here's the deal, and this is going to be hard to explain on the radio, but let me just tell you this. There's this many people that want to live in San Diego, and there's about this much available. So let's just cut right down to the facts that there's not much available out there. there is a tremendous opportunity for buyers. Using your word, if I may, opportunistic is fantastic as well. There's a lot of opportunity for the sellers. They've been waiting for a long time to offload properties. Is a good time, and buyers, if you can get into something, and you're loving it. I mean, because there is just such a high demand for property. And always will be, I believe, in San Diego.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. When you say, what he's saying is there's this many people who want to live here, a whole bunch. There's this many homes for sale, not that much.
Right.
And so the supply and demand equation starts to factor in. And I think that's always going to be a constant here in the San Diego marketplace. In fact, I think it's going to continue to drive it. Michael Gaddis, what do you think? One word. Describe the current state of the San Diego real estate market. One word, and tell me why.
Wow, I'm going to be a complete downer compared to you two. If I had to give one word, I'd say disappointing. I'd say that, while I agree that, sellers have been waiting a long time for the market to turn, I think a lot of sellers right now were wishing that we were in last year's market where there's a lot more appreciation going on. I've been doing a lot of analysis and research on statistics of, listings, expired listings, things like that. The amount of listings that go into expired is incredible. And when you analyze why they're going expired, it's because of unrealistic expectations on selling price. And so I think it's very disappointing to a lot of sellers right now. I think it's still a good time to sell, but I think definitely keeping realistic expectations is important.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that. I think that stems from the concept of getting ahead of the market. Your home seller, you go, oh, well, it's going up about, $10,000 a month, so we'll just price it out there, and then 6 months from now, someone will buy it for that. I don't know what the logic is behind that or how that gets started, but the problem is when the market stops or even settles or starts to go the other direction, now you have major price reductions and things like that come to the forefront, which is something I want to talk about right now because we're really in a price reduction type market. We're seeing price reductions in some zip codes. 50% of the listed properties have price reductions on them. In a lot of zip codes, 30+% of the properties listed for sale have a price reduction associated with them. And that's a tremendous amount. So the mental process behind a seller going through a price reduction, let's talk them through that. Let's pretend we're talking to a seller right now who's in a situation where they've got a home that's sitting. And, how can you best advise a seller to handle a price reduction type situation, mentally, Voltaire?
Well, mentally, I would always like to handle price reduction up front, meaning setting realistic expectations. And there's always those sellers that say, hey, I understand the market's, this amount, but I want a little bit higher because I'm banking on, the buyer being one of my neighbor's family members that wants to live there next to their mom. Now, if it isn't handled up front and let's say there's a price reduction needed, then you just have to state the facts and be realistic with the seller. That way they know that the next price reduction that they do has to be the one that's going to sell their home. And we have to keep reminding them over the past 5 years, 38% of homes, like Michael mentioned, expired over the past 5 years. Last year in 2013 was probably one of the best years where only 26% of homes expired. But even before last year, across the country, it's about 40-45% of homes that expire and don't sell the first time around. They sell the second time or third time or fourth time on the market. So we have to just, give them supporting facts and then go from there.
So what do? Do you say, all right, here's our price reduction schedule. If we get to this date and we haven't sold, we're going to go to do this. You actually frame that out up front?
Yeah, up front. If, first off, there should never be any overpriced listings taken, but we all know that that's not the case, right? Because ethically, as a realtor, you're not supposed to take any overpriced listings. So set it up front. Like I've had clients before that told me, hey, look it, I know it's not worth, but I need this much. And if I can't sell it in 30 days or 60 days, then I'll reduce it. So sometimes you do set those schedules up front. But most importantly, just the mind frame the mindset that it is, overpriced.
Conceptual. Brad Brinkman, what do you think, man, as far as advising sellers on how to handle kind of what they're going through in a price reduction circumstance?
Well, the first thing I say when I sit down with them is really what I feel, and that is I wish that I could get you that price. I really do. But as we all know, it's ultimately the price is determined by what the buyers will pay. And, now I do extensive marketing. However, it doesn't matter if you put them up on, the Goodyear blimp and fly it over Qualcomm and Petco. If it's not priced right, it's not going to sell. So, I'm very empathetic, and I think that, there's not enough agents that are, like Michael, where it's just very realistic. I mean, he's saying disappointed because I agree with him in some aspects of that because, I get disappointed when agents aren't realistic with their sellers, and that tends to take a real toll on the market because things are priced very unrealistically, and oftentimes not brought. That seller, isn't brought into reality, soon enough to where there's a point to where it just becomes. As we all call like a stale listing, people, you're then chasing the market instead of coming out as this new, fresh product.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And you can't really redo that. People try to go off the market and come back on, but most agents will recognize the property. They see that, they see what's going on. So I totally get you there. That makes a ton of sense. Michael Gaddis, what do you think? How can you best advise a seller who's in a price reduction situation or conversation?
Well, I'm kind of on board with Voltaire. I like to handle those things up front. I get it. We all get it. Sellers want to sell their house for as much as possible. But there are certain restrictions to that. I mean, there's comparables that you have and there's loans. People who buy houses typically need loans. So in order to get a loan, you have to have an appraisal. It has to appraise unless somebody comes in and pays cash for your house because they think it's so much better than everyone else's that they don't care what the appraisal is. So the best way that I find to deal with it is to just really be frank with them up front. And not tell them just what they want to hear just to get a listing. And I think that's really important because I see it happen a lot. I mean, in neighborhoods, I can tell by my research. When I look through, I can tell that people are just throwing up numbers just to get a listing so they can start marketing in a neighborhood to say, hey, look what I've got. But it'll end up coming off. And that's what I'll tell sellers. I'll say, look, I can sit here and tell you whatever you want to hear, but the bottom line is it has to sell within reality. And your house is worth about this. Now, we could try to push the envelope a little bit, but I'm going to tell you, if it doesn't sell or we don't get a lot of viewings within, a certain amount of time, then we're probably overpriced because, as Brad said, a house is only worth what a buyer's willing to pay for it in a given market at a given time. So, that's what I think it is, keeping expectations realistic.
Yeah, very, very true. And I think the fear that most home sellers have is exactly inverted from reality. It's much riskier to list your home for a higher price than it is to list your home for a lower price. Don't forget, in the end, you still have to say okay. And you don't have to ever say okay to any offer that you receive when you have your home listed for sale. If you want to catch the live broadcast of this program in video, we're streaming live right now on MrCredit.tv. Of course, you can submit all your questions through MrCredit.org. Coming up, our very first debate topic, 100% home loans are coming back. They are here, in fact. Is this the signal we're at the top of the market? When we come back, we'll make you smarter than everyone else. Stick around.
You're listening to The Real Estate Debate with Mr. Credit on ESPN 1700. To contact Mr. Credit or any guest on today's show, go to MrCredit.org.
All right, welcome back to The Real Estate Debate. Mr. Credit here, guaranteeing to make you smarter than everyone else. This is where we debate the hottest topics in San Diego real estate with some of San Diego's top real estate professionals. Voltaire Leppi is in the studio with us today from Foster Hamilton and FreePropertyEvaluations.com. Brad Brinkman is here, the beach seller, www.bradbrinkman.com. And Michael Gaddis is here with the Michael Gaddis Realty Group. MichaelGaddis.com is the website. So, fellas, it's time for our first debate topic. 100% home loans are coming back. There's an article in the UT about a week ago or so talking about a local bank that is now giving out 100% financing. A local bank. So not some obscure, national lender who's, potentially has Wall Street ties. A local bank putting together a 100% home loan package. Now, the last time we saw this, it caused a mania, which caused a major crash. Would you consider this to be the signal, or potentially one of the signals, that we are at or near the top of the market? Brad Brinkman, let's start with you.
Well, I would say yes, it could be an indication, and I'll tell you that it's funny that the bank did that. It's almost like a selective amnesia of what happened previously. Come on, that we saw what happened when that came into play last time. I think that what we see now is like, hey, we have a pretty healthy, balanced market for the most part. I mean, it's not perfect, never is, but when you look at, we haven't seen a massive increase we haven't seen the massive appreciation this year like we saw last year. And I think if we did, we'd be in trouble.
Even more cost for concern.
Absolutely. Then we want to be that. Then my word would be cautious. It wouldn't have been fantastic. So I think I'm so excited about the balance of the market and the slow, steady appreciation that we're seeing.
Do you believe that this is a signal that we're at the top?
I think it's a signal to watch out that the top is coming if we see more of this. But as far as directly to answer your question, right now, is this a signal that we're at the top? No, it's not a signal we're at the top. It's a signal to be like, what? They are doing that? This is something to be very cognizant of. I mean, looking at, hey, just the typical cycles of, the up and down markets over the past 5 and 6 decades. And if you were to work backwards, we're looking at like 2017, 2018, radar up, watch out. That's all.
I like that. So not necessarily at the top, but potentially a red flag, you could call it. Michael Gaddis, what do you think? These 100% home loans coming back, is that a signal that we could be at the top here?
Well, I think it is. I think it is because, I come from Missouri, and in Missouri where the housing prices are a little more down to earth, and qualifying for a loan full doc isn't quite as crazy as it is here. But when I first moved here from Missouri, I'm driving through neighborhoods where houses are $1 million, and I mean, they're just all over the place. And I'm like, how in the world does a family qualify for that on full doc? How is that possible that they could raise enough money to do that? Well, 100% financing is a very difficult proposition, and I get it that the bank that you're talking about is doing special underwriting. They're looking at, extraneous circumstances and things like that. However, I think that what the bank's missing is the fact that a lot of these people qualify on 2 incomes. And if you take what happened yesterday at Microsoft, just over here in Rancho Bernardo, a lot of people got laid off unexpectedly. If one of those incomes goes away, you're talking about dominoes, and these people have no skin in the fight, and it wouldn't take much for them to walk away. So I think it's a dangerous proposition. I do think it's a sign that we're at the top.
Okay, yeah. Well, it has been in the past, that's for sure, and it is most definitely a riskier loan than, let's say, an 80% loan. So I see where you're coming from there. Voltaire, what do you think? Is this a sign here, these 100% loans, that we're at or near the top of the market?
As far as being a sign that we're close to the top, yes. But at the same time, I'm looking at it from the buyer's point of view. I think it's a great program for them. A lot of buyers that I deal with are FHA or even VA buyers, which are already doing, 0 down, 100% financing, and the government keeps doing them. So as long as the local bank is underwriting the buyers, looking at obviously their debt to income ratios and other factors, as Michael mentioned, I think it's a good idea. At the same time, it obviously, moves the real estate market a lot. It's going to help out a lot. Once that happens, then it creates jobs for everyone, mortgage company, escrow companies, landscapers, painters, etc. So at the end of the day, I think it's a really good thing as long as it's underwritten well. And I'm looking at it from the buyer's perspective, not the banks. Obviously, the banks, if you're doing 100% financing, it could possibly be a dangerous loan to do, especially if someone loses their job, like Michael said. But
yeah, and I'll just tell you this: I think that's the real danger here. Yeah, because I do think this is a bad sign. I don't know if it necessarily means we're at the top of the market, but I think it's a very bad sign, and here's why. You want to get creative with financing? You can get creative all day long. You can do no doc deals, 80% LTV. You can't do these 100% LTV loans. In fact, I'm even afraid of just the FHA loans. I mean, FHA, you're 3.5% down, so you're upside down as soon as you walk in the property. I mean, if you want to turn around and sell it for the same price the next day, you're losing money, right?
Right.
So, if you have that type of situation where you're doing 100% financing, taking a higher rate, or doing FHA financing and paying these exorbitant mortgage insurance premiums, right, monthly premiums, if that property loses value, it makes it more compelling for you to want to walk away or be done with it. Like, why am I paying $800 a month mortgage insurance on this property that's upside down $50,000? So I think that the money down is the most important aspect to the financing. I think that's the part that we can't loosen up on. If you want to get creative and say, hey, listen, this guy had a foreclosure last year, but he's got 20% down and he's got a good job, I would finance that guy personally. But someone who's 100% financing with perfect credit and perfect job history and money in the bank, I'd rather not finance that person. Because the reality is, on that purchase, me as the lender, I have no recourse.
Right.
It's a non-recourse situation, which means that it really doesn't matter if they have a huge retirement account or anything like that. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference to me. So I think it's actually a very dangerous thing, and I think the more we see of it, not only should we become cautious, but we should become bearish almost if we continue to see stuff like this. Any rebuttals there?
I'd like to just say one thing. It is good from a buyer's perspective, but when you increase the pool of buyers, which will somewhat inflate the housing prices a little bit, with people who aren't technically shouldn't be able to qualify for a loan, you run the risk that in the end, if these people default, you're going to cause another mini housing crash, because all these people are not going to they're going to take this 100% program away, and then all of a sudden these people are going to start defaulting. So you're kind of artificially inflating the values again in a way.
Yeah, I think it is. It would be considered a stimulus almost of some sort.
And I would like to add that
Please.
a lot of this, because you brought up a good point. It's like there's like these you came into town. There's this $1 million. The first time that I actually really started to pay attention. I've been around real estate my whole life, but I remember I was 22 years old. Started looking at the prices and the differentiation. I see that there's a pretty good percentage of properties in San Diego. The reason that these people are in there is because of products of past generations' efforts. I mean, these are just properties that have they've had this equity, and it's carrying over, it's rolling over. But then you have the other part, and this is where the pain comes in, because I felt so horrible for all these people that I had help out in short sales. I was thankful to do a tremendous amount of them, and they're sitting there. And, they had made these good incomes, and in some of them, a lot of military families, I remember sitting there going, this sucks, because, they bought this property for, some $800,000, and this especially in your area, and I'm looking at trying to get rid of it for $450, and if they start, hacking away at some of their loans that they had, from Navy Fed and stuff like that, they were losing security clearances and stuff. So, this is what's painful for me, where I was like, hey man, didn't you forget about all this crap that happened and the horribleness that spread? There was a lot of good things that came from that. There was jobs created at the beginning when they started doing these loans, but at the end, the byproduct of it was garbage.
Yeah, I think we have to be, and I agree with you 100%, Brad. Points well made. That we can't forget that while it may seem good on the front end to a home buyer, because they're able to buy a house, is it really good for them? Well, it's kind of like ice cream with your little kids if you have them. They really want it. Yeah. How much of it should they eat, though?
Yeah, and I think you have to look at, not the whole real estate market as a whole, but maybe break it down. If you're looking at a $300,000 purchase, first-time buyer, all of a sudden that monthly payment is the same or less than what rent would be in that area. So at the end of the day, for a buyer, what's the better investment? Throwing money away in rent, because it really is throwing away your money, or is real estate a better investment where they could earn, some appreciation, whether it be 3% or 5% or 10%, whatever you want to give it, and at the same time have some tax benefits. Now, in this particular scenario with this bank, they gave the loan to a family that had enough for a down payment, but they chose to pay off other debts, and at the same time, this type of loan didn't have any mortgage insurance. So at that, just knocking that out the way, then the payment's a lot more affordable. So, and the last thing about that bank is the loan wasn't secured by the federal government. Okay, because it's considered
Precisely.
a risky loan. So at that point, it's up to the bank to underwrite the process. And with this particular family that they gave in the example, they had the down payment from a recent sale of another property.
Right, they did, and so if someone needs 100% financing, I'd say that's more of a red flag than someone who wants to use it as a financial tool. Michael, real quick, put your attorney hat on. The banks can't write in recourse, right? That's a statewide law.
That's correct.
So even if they're doing some sort of off-the-books loan, they can't say, oh, well, we're going to be able to come after you for this.
Well, it would be a purchase money loan anyway, so it would be a non-recourse loan just by the nature of what type of loan it is.
No matter what kind of terms are put in.
That's right.
Okay. That's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure because, The banks are always angling to try to figure out a way to put you up against it, so I just wanted to double-check that real quick. Great stuff going here on the Real Estate Debate, ESPN 1700. Save the station in your dial. Coming up, debate topic number 2. What should be more important to a home buyer? The interest rate, the payment, or the purchase price? We'll tell you why. We'll make you smarter than everyone else when we come back. Stick around.
You're listening to the Real Estate Debate with Mr. Credit on ESPN 1700. To contact Mr. Credit or any guest on today's show, go to mrcredit.org.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for hanging out. Welcome to the Real Estate Debate. We're debating the hottest topics in San Diego real estate with some of the best local real estate professionals. Voltaire Leppi is in here from Foster Hamilton in South Bay. FreePropertyEvaluations.com is his website. Brad Brinkman is here from The Beach Seller. BradBrinkman.com is his website. Michael Gaddis is here with the Michael Gaddis Realty Group. MichaelGaddis.com. He is also an attorney. So, debate topic number 2. And I think this is where we can really shed some light on misnomers in the community, especially for home buyers. But what should be more important to a home buyer? We're going to start with you, Michael. Should it be the interest rate they're getting, the amount of the payment, or the purchase price, and why?
Well, I think this one's pretty easy for me. I'm conservative by nature, so I'd say the payment. I think, in a normal housing community, a normal house, people have to determine what their budget is, and they have to have a certain budget that they're comfortable with. Just because you can buy a more expensive house doesn't mean you necessarily should. You have to plan for different types of scenarios, and you have to really stick by that. And I know it's really nice because, like, when I go shopping for cars, if I go to the Mercedes dealership and test drive a Mercedes, I'm going to want to buy it, right? But it's not necessarily in my budget to buy it. And I think the same thing goes with homeowners. Homeowners always want more than what they can really afford. They think they can have it right then and there, and maybe they can qualify for it, but is it overall good for them? No. So I think that they should keep payment in perspective.
Okay, payment should be number 1. As far as we're talking about, just what should be most important to home buyers: interest rate, payment, or purchase price. Brad, what do you think?
Now, I'm going to say payment, but I'm going to say payment over the life of the loan because, as you remember, we had these adjustable rate mortgages that, it was a great payment to start. And people, we're in this, drive-through fast society. We want everything right away. And they're saying, gosh, there's that cool house. And, I can get it for this much. And then, later on, the reality comes, So that's something that I would say payment over the life of your loan. So know what your payments are going to be. How long are they going to be like that? And that is the absolute most important thing to do. Because if you look at things like, with the whole loan process, you want to make sure that you're dealing with somebody that is reputable and is preferably referred to you. Because you figure points, when you're paying points on a mortgage, that's money you're never going to get back, right? It's gone. So you look at and you say payments, where am I really at? And that's why I believe payment is the most important thing.
Okay, payment's the most important thing times 2. Voltaire, what do you think? Interest rate, payment, or purchase price? What's most important to a home buyer?
From what I've seen, I ran across different types of buyers. So this is kind of like a question to where it's like, okay, which type of buyer?
Well, let's put it this way. What should be most important?
What should be? Okay, payment. What should be more important? Payment. Now, if you're maybe a more savvy buyer or you've gathered enough money for a 20, 30% down payment, then at that point you start looking at price. That's what I would start looking at, just because if you save that amount of money for a down payment and you're not a first-time buyer getting a 3.5% down payment or a VA 100% financing, then at that point, if you have 20% down, you can start looking at price. And the reason is because you're in charge of your finances. You saved enough or you made enough money to put 20% down. And at that point, what you want is you probably want a deal. Ultimately, the factor when you take interest rate, it's going to and the price, it's going to come down to payment, right? But as a whole, the population, we don't keep very good track of our finances or have a budget like Michael mentioned. But if you're in that position where you have 20%, 30% down, then I think for most people in that position, it's going to be price.
Okay, and I think that makes sense. And so I'm shocked that everyone said payment. I really am. I'm shocked that no one said interest rate, but I'm not at the same time, because personally I believe that purchase price is the most important thing, and I'll tell you why. Because interest rate shouldn't really be the answer here, and a lot of people focus too much on that. I think they focus too much on what the interest rate is. The purchase price is the most important thing, because that's the one thing that isn't renegotiable down the road. You know, the interest rate, you can refinance. Hey, if rates are high today, that's okay. Interest rates go up, they go down. When they come down, you'll be able to take advantage of it. If they go up, you're fixed in. So you'll feel like you have a great deal. So either way, I feel like with interest rate, you can't really lose. I think payment is also something that people focus on, but here's the problem with focusing on payment. If you focus on payment, too many times what you'll find is that the banks will actually give you the opportunity to buy way too much house. You know, so when you're talking about, you know, payment, you really have to look at a couple of things. You really have to look internally at what you can legitimately afford. And so it's a good idea. Obviously, you can't not think about payment, but I think you also have to really look at, you know, how much home can we really afford to buy? And let's really zero in on that, because we're going to get lost if we go, well, what's the difference between $3,000 a month and $3,500? I just need to work 2 days of overtime a week, you know, we can get this. And so that's where I think purchase price is more important. Rebuttals?
Yes. I don't mean to be devil's advocate for it, but
please.
But in your analysis, you're saying that purchase price is more important. But you said that at some point you might be able to renegotiate it. But let's assume they can't renegotiate it. Let's say they got himself into something, and the next thing you know, one of them either loses a job, gets maybe a price cut, maybe the values go down, and they can no longer refinance. Then they're stuck with that payment. I think one of the dangers we got into last time, and you made a good point earlier about, you know, payment, but it has to be continuous. It has to be a fully amortized payment. I'm not talking about 5-year interest only or 3-year adjustables. But I think that's a big problem we had last time. Last time what happened is everybody was getting houses, and all the mortgage brokers were like, hey, take this. You can refinance in 2 to 3 years. You'll be fine. No problem. We'll give you this interest only. It'll be great. And then when those adjustments hit and when those P&Is hit, that's when everyone got stuck. And so I think that when I'm saying stick on payment, I'm like, let's find out what payment you feel comfortable paying. Then we'll reverse engineer it and find out what your purchase price range is, and we can go from there. So that's what I mean by when I'm saying.
And I essentially agree with what you're saying, because you're saying you're going to use the payment to reverse engineer what the purchase price is, and that's what I'm saying should be the focus, is the purchase price. I mean, in the end, that's where you have to look and say, all right, this is how much home we can buy. And you got to really hold yourself to that, because it's easy to say, well, what do the next range of houses look like?
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Derek. For 20% of the population that's good with their budget and, you know, knows exactly, you know, what they could afford, then yeah, price is the most important. But for the everyday first time buyer, I would still have to say 80% of the population, they're going to have to, you know, look at payment, because they're going to have that forever. But and at the end of the day, guess what? 30 years from now, 15 years from now, 20, they're going to have equity. So they would have made a good decision whether or not, you know, they took the price into consideration, because, again, the bank's going to do an appraisal and you get it at market value. But if you have that 20%, 30% down payment, you know, then it's price.
And I think if I frame this differently and say, you know, would you rather buy a house and I could do the math at some point and say, would you rather buy a house at $500,000 and have a, you know, 3% interest rate, or buy the same house at $400,000 and have a 10% interest rate? You know, I mean, that kind of if whatever they would be to have the same payment. Mm-hmm. Right. I would rather have the lower purchase price.
Of course, yeah.
Right? Because rates come in, I'll refinance, I'll grab those savings. If I take the higher purchase price, there's no renegotiation. You know, I've got a great rate. It's probably not going to get any lower. I'm kind of in where I am. So that, I think in the end, it does boil down to price, which is obviously a formula of payment. Brad, do you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Okay, so I want to say no stress and peace. I mean, that's what we all want, right? And how do we achieve that? Well, we want certainty. And that's why I said payment, because at least you have some level of certainty. It's like, hey, payment. This is always going to be this payment. Now, with prices, I do get your point because, if you're looking at things and just for simplicity, if things are going, for $500,000, well, you just let me be more simple. If things are going for $5, you want to buy it for $3. That way, you have some insulation. If there was some problem, you have some insurance. So if you have a problem with the market or you lose your job, well, hey, you bought this thing, significantly enough under market to where you have, you don't have to stress about it. You can get rid of it and not lose money.
Yeah.
But I just think that it's nice to have that certainty of payment because the market can go up and down. You don't really know where it's going to go. Obviously, if you're going to be over there over the years, and we live in San Diego, it's going to go up over time.
Right.
And it's slower. Same thing for the most part of the country. But that's what I like about payment is certainty.
I agree with you. And in fact, I'm writing an article right now that'll be posted on the utsandiego.com under the real estate section that's called Buying a Home is not an investment, it's a hedge. And it's exactly what you're talking about. What you're doing is you're hedging your housing costs when you buy a house. That's what you're really doing. Ideally, it's not an investment because you're not selling it. I mean, if you're buying a house the right way, you're buying it to keep it forever as part of your financial plan and your overall, retirement strategy. In which case, it's not an investment. It's a hedge. It's a hedge against housing costs, and it's almost like an insurance policy against future rising rents. And you pay this certain premium every month, and then when your policy comes due, the house is paid off, and you just pay the taxes, and you're good to go. So I think there's a whole mindset shift there. If you look at it more of a hedge, you say, okay, I'm hedging, so I want to hedge my payment to be this for 30 years.
Yeah.
You think about it that way. All right, I'm going to take this as my payment for 30 years instead of going and renting for X number of dollars and then seeing what happens. And that's really what's kind of behind home buying and the beauty in it over the long haul. All right, great stuff so far. Very close race here, almost an exact three-way tie going into the final debate topic. When we come back, house flipping, very prominent in San Diego. Is it a good thing or a bad thing for this current market? When we come back, we'll make you smarter than everyone else.
You're listening to The Real Estate Debate with Mr. Credit on ESPN 1700. To contact Mr. Credit or any guest on today's show, go to mrcredit.org.
All right, welcome back. Final segment, final topic, the real estate debate, episode number 6. Will, go ahead and bring in the episode 6 trophy. We're gonna have to give it to somebody here in about 10 minutes. A little less than 10 minutes. We're going to be giving it away, so we'll bring it into the studio. Debate topic number 3, house flipping, very prominent in San Diego. In fact, this might be the most densely populated house flipping area in the country. It very well could be. It's so competitive. It's so competitive. And we know some really good guys who do a really good job at this. The question is this, though. House flipping, because it is so prominent in San Diego, is that a good thing, or does that cause problems for the current real estate market? And tell me why, Voltaire.
Okay. Well, my price point here in San Diego is on the lower end, somewhere in between $360,000 to $375,000. So in my point of view, it's a great thing, okay, for house flippers to be out there and do their thing. And the reason why is because I do a lot of first-time buyers, okay? What they do is they go into a home and then they want a home that looks nice, okay, that's good quality and looks newer. Now, if house flippers weren't around, they could probably buy, instead of buying a $350,000 home that was fixed up, they could probably buy a $320,000 home that was maybe, original from 1950s or 60s, 70s, that isn't as nice, needed more work. Now, a lot of these first-time buyers, they can't do the work themselves. They don't have that money. And once they actually go into this home, they're okay with paying an extra, $50,000 to $100,000 more than what the original flipper bought it for. And I think that's why maybe flippers got a bad reputation, just because they're, inflating the prices, or they're buying them low and selling them high. But at the end of the day, it helps the consumers, VA and FHA buyers. And also it helps, the whole community. The neighbors' houses get, their value goes up just because this house is, sold for more or is in pretty good condition. And it helps out the whole family, including the children, like their psychology. A lot of kids in the areas where I sell homes, they're proud. They're proud to live in this nice home that looks new and things like that, compared to what they could have been if there wasn't house flippers, maybe a little bit more rundown area or house. And then at that point, it's just like, okay, I don't even want to bring my friends over.
And I understand your macro point here, which is basically that, the average first-time buyer doesn't have the capital to basically go in and make the renovations to get a house looking brand new. And so the home flippers who are out there, or real estate investors who are flipping homes, they provide that opportunity. So that makes a ton of sense. Brad, what do you think about house flippers in this market right now?
This market right now, terrible. The worst thing, I can't stand it. I'm going to tell you why, because, like Voltaire said, that there was, there are some good byproducts of house flipping. But if you look at our economy, in our employment clusters and in our income clusters, where we have a lot of high end, a lot of low end, and not much in the middle. So when you have these flippers coming in, I think the statistic was there was over 2,200 full-time investors in San Diego County.
Wow.
So, that is a lot. And so you get a lot of people that get the mojo from these shows and stuff that you see, flip this house, and they see, oh, there's the big prize. And it's like, again, that drive-through quick fix. Yeah, I can do it. I can make the money. I'm going to do it. And, if they all thought like they should, where, hey, you know what? We really want to provide value, because if the value is there, then I'm all for flipping. But when you go and you put something on there and you add $100,000 to a price when there's no value, nothing that can say, hey, look, these things have sold for this much, so that's why we can demand a price this way. It's like, oh no, it's great, it's just gonna work out. That really kills the market. And it's just I look at like Wall Street Journal says 95% of investors over a 10-year period, they're going to lose, right? So you have all these investors in here. It's bad for the market overall.
Okay.
Some good byproducts, but bad.
Overall right now, not good, because maybe prices are up too much, you think, and there are still a lot of people out there who don't know what they're doing, and they could be having a negative impact on the market. Totally understand that. Michael Gaddis, what do you think about house flippers in today's market?
Well, I kind of have a hybrid view. From some ways I see it exactly like Voltaire says, that a lot of these house flippers are going into really depreciated areas, and they're really changing the atmosphere in the community. They're taking a lot of homes that are on the verge of almost falling down and rehabilitating them. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. However, I think Brad's right in the fact that you have to be careful. These house flippers aren't trying to sell them at fair market value. They're trying to sell them above fair market value. And when you negotiate with them, they're telling you, we don't care what the appraisal comes in. If you want it, you're going to have to bring in the extra money. Well, what does that do? That starts artificially pushing up the price of the values in the neighborhood. So even other sellers who want to sell, and their house might not be like that. It's hard for them because they can't compete with that, right? They can't rehab their own houses and stuff. So I think it's hard on the sellers, and I think it's dangerous for the community, because if you start artificially pressing up appraisal values by creating comps that are not in line with realistic comps, what does that remind you of anything? Didn't that happen before when a real estate agent can meet an appraiser and say, here's what I think the house is worth, and can you do it? Can you do it? And they would somehow find a way to do it. And I don't think it's quite that rampant, but I do think it's dangerous, because every time I've been in negotiations with one of these house flippers, it's always like, that's my price, take it or leave it. If they want it, they have to bring in the difference from the appraised value. So I usually don't take my buyers to a flipped house, or at least I'll warn them about what the mentality of these flippers are.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that one before, that was going on. And so I think from a big picture perspective is that if it's a competitive flipping market, that actually it should be good for the community, right? It should be, because of the fact that if it's competitive, that means that their margins are being squeezed, which means that they're essentially passing on a lot of work for less money than they would be if it was less competitive. If there was just one game in town doing all the flips and they were setting their prices, they would be getting a higher margin, meaning they would be making more money per deal. It's hard to make money per deal now. So what I see that as being a pretty good thing, because if they're able to renovate houses, improve homes, and then they're not really passing on a whole lot of costs necessarily, then that should be a good thing for the market. It should be. I have not heard any stories like like the ones you're telling, though, Michael, where the flippers are just hard and fast. Are those big companies that are doing that, or are those
they're
small?
Usually smaller companies.
Individual
they
type.
They just have it, and they want to get their rate of return, and that's what they're going to do, and they stick by it. And usually I'll monitor them, and usually they'll end up getting what they want somehow.
Is that right?
Yes, it's ridiculous.
So I think the bigger companies who actually have legit operations and have the plans for longevity don't do that.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, I've noticed that what you said, Brad and Michael, that was happening a lot in 2012, like June 2012, when prices just started skyrocketing, and through 13, and then now they're starting to plateau. From what I'm seeing, late last year, through this year, they started plateauing, which means a lot of these investors, like you mentioned, 2000, I've noticed a lot of them just got squeezed out. They're not even doing flips anymore, and I'm talking to some of them, and they're just like, yeah, there's just no inventory, and we're out of it. But obviously, there's still flippers around buying all cash. But at the end of the day, I think it's a good thing. And in this market right now, a couple of years ago, there's a lot of guys just doing like, not that good work, and it wasn't, they're increasing prices without giving value. But I think in this market, like you said, it's more competitive.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and that's gonna conclude today's real estate debate. The tally is in. Voltaire Lepi, you have won yourself the real estate debate, my friend. Congratulations. Let's give him a golf clap. Take your trophy. Well done, sir. A very tight margin. 10, 8, and 8 was the score. You really came from behind, actually, in the final segment, so well done, my friend. Big thanks as well to Brad Brinkman for being here and collecting his hardware. And Michael Gaddis, we look forward to having you back on the show in the future as well. I'm sure you will be a champion one of these days. That's it for this week's show. We'll be back again on Monday at noon to make you smarter than everyone else. Questions, mrcredit.org. We'll see you then.